Um, so hello, everyone. Welcome to Growing Agency, the sixth webinar in our series on sustainable diets, and the final webinar of this year. Thank you for joining us today. If this is your first webinar of the series, or if you've been here along for all six. This webinar series has emerged from the rich content of the Routledge Handbook of Sustainable Diets, which was co-edited by Dr. Kathleen Cavani and Dr. Paolo Prosperi. They recruited researchers from around the world to contribute to this diverse collection of research on sustainable food systems. So with these webinars, we hope not only to continue sharing this research, but also to spark new discussions, build new collaborations, and continue building on the research. So we highly welcome audience questions, thoughts, and ideas. Many of you are likely working in the food sustainability, food system space, and so you are invited to share your own experience and knowledge in this webinar during our discussion period, which will happen at the end after all of our presenters have presented. But first, we'll hear from our 7 incredible researchers joining us today who have all contributed to the handbook with a focus on food sovereignty and agency over diets, which is key to sustainable food systems. And so today we're kind of zooming into specific areas, including India, Kosrae, South America, but other chapters in the handbook explore food sovereignty in sub-Saharan Africa, China, Panama, and as well as indigenous food sovereignty more broadly. So there's lots of cases in the handbook itself, but let's turn to our attention to today's presenters, and please drop questions in the chat as we go along, or you can save them for later during our discussion time at the end after all the authors have presented. So I'll introduce our first presenters, David Fazzino and Ashley Meredith. David Fazzino is a Pennsylvania lawyer and associate professor of anthropology at Commonwealth University of Pennsylvania in Bloomsburg. He teaches courses in cultural anthropology, contemporary world issues, and human rights. His research interests include human rights, food systems, and heritage preservation. And Ashley Meredith is a practicing applied anthropologist on research sabbatical from the government of the Federated States of Micronesia at the University of Göttingen. Her work examines sound-based practices as modes of knowledge in coping with climate change, with particular attention to Kosrae's sonic epistemologies and how Kosraeans are making climate action upon the sound knowledge. Her current research contributes to an ERC-funded project on sound knowledge and is being advanced through extended fieldwork and collaborative study. So welcome, David and Ashley.
Thank you for that introduction, Natalie. We appreciate it. I'm not sure if Ashley's in the room or not, but
I am.
I guess.
Are you ready for the presentation to be up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so our chapter, we looked at Kosrae in the Federated States of Micronesia. So for those of you that are unfamiliar with this location, it's about roughly halfway between Honolulu and Sydney in the Pacific. And the title of our presentation, Globalization Gets It Coming and Going, also the title of our chapter. So next slide, please. So our paper, we were interested in this question of food systems, and I typically have employed Wolfgang Sachs's notion on sustainable development of varying degrees or approaches to sustainable development. The contest perspective, the home perspective, and the astronaut perspective. And I think, from my work in food systems over some 2.5 decades or so in a variety of different capacities. I think I've often been an advocate of sustainable or local food systems, or assumed that local food systems were necessarily sustainable along certain parameters. And certainly, we've seen the influence in a variety of different settings of colonialism, imperialism, and a variety of other isms in extracting wealth and resources from local peoples. This particular paper examines Kosrae, which has, of course, gone through a variety of encounters with European powers as well as Americans and the Japanese, each bringing their own elements into the Kosraean food system, which has been incredibly resilient. So our paper looked at the transmission of intergenerational learning and knowledge surrounding food systems. Ashley will talk specifically about sound knowledge with an example of the necklop dance as well. Next slide, please. Okay, and so obviously the COVID-19 pandemic played a big part, I think, in all of our research is over this time period. And I'm going to let Ashley talk a little bit more about that in terms of sound knowledge. But one of the things that we noticed were generational shifts in terms of food consumption patterns, desire for consumption of local foods, and also how local foods were conceptualized. Um, and so within Micronesia itself, we have a variety of cultural identities and local knowledges of food systems. And I think the thing that pointed it out for me the most was walking along the beach in Wollong and watching three men of various ages looking at an outboard motor and how they were talking about repairing this outboard motor as an essential component of the food system in terms of traditional fishing practices. So just looking at how basically newer technologies help to support traditional ways of accessing food resources. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ashley.
Okay. Hi, everyone. As David mentioned, the pandemic brought quite a bit of change in Kosrae, but some of that was brewing before the pandemic, actually. Kosrae had already engaged in sound-based epistemologies for subsistence, including the moon calendar and the necklap women's fishing dance. And then in 2018, Kosraeans began asserting sound-based practices for environmental stewardship and climate change preparedness as they created the Makantoe Conservation Area. It's about 15 square kilometers in the center of the island. And the community members drew on sonic knowledge, songs, chants, and oral histories to build consensus and guide management decisions about this interior part of the island. This local governance work demonstrated that sound is not simply a marker of heritage, it's a living epistemic system with political and environmental force that Kosraeans relied upon for reclaiming their food sovereignty in the center of the island. So when the pandemic closed the borders, my colleagues and we went fishing. They taught me how to do the women's fishing dance, and they taught me how to fish in the lagoon and turn those animals into food as we faced basically disruptions in this external supply chains. Our the vessels that carried a lot of food didn't arrive on their monthly basis. It was like 2 months before we saw the next container ship. So after about 3 weeks, we anticipated that we might need to rely on some of these practices. So they taught me. And in this way, the necklap dance is not simply a symbolic of subsistence as much as it is a living pedagogical system that strengthens food security by renewing the skills, relations, and sensory orientations needed for the communal harvest. The teachings underscored how the songs, chants, and dances operated not only for cultural expression, but as practical knowledge for subsistence and coordination. Coordination is a key topic in Kosrae. The villages have sections, and they often organize themselves around these sections in groups. They call them kumi. Actually, it's a Japanese word. And towards the end of the pandemic, as the border started to open, it was actually just before there was an inauguration of the FSM Expo to showcase sonic practices that took place in 2022. A newly composed Makantoe song was performed at this event, affirming the mobility and adaptability of sound knowledge, while also sounding out the protection this area and The music reverberated through the crowd. The performance bridged archival story, contemporary composition, governance of the environment, and reinforced sound as a legitimate epistemic medium for the communities to interpret these changes and to continue to care for the interior of the island. So the pandemic ultimately illuminated what colonial and administrative heritage categories routinely misrecognize. These practices function as adaptive knowledge systems, and they supported food procurement, collective action, ecological attunement at a moment when external supply chains were really unreliable. So at a moment when climate change and import dependence threatened local food systems, these practices reaffirm the capacities of the communities to act and adapt and embody taking care of themselves, taking care of each other, and with the ability to basically continue to live. So thank you very much for your attention. That's all I have to say.
Thank you so much, David and Ashley.
Oh.
Yeah, it's so interesting, sound-based knowledge, and just a very good reminder how interwoven culture is with food and food resilience. So I'd now like to shift it over to our next presenters. Dr. Manish Anand is a senior fellow at the Energy and Resources Institute, TERI, New Delhi, with over 18 years of experience in policy research, advocacy, and capacity development. His work focuses on sustainability transitions, environmental governance, and socio-technical innovations across food, agriculture, land use, climate change, and emerging technologies. He holds a postgraduate degree in agriculture extension and a PhD in science policy. And Ms. Vidhu Gupta is a project research scientist at the Indian Institute of Technology, IIT, Roorkee, with over 13 years of experience in epidemiological research and capacity development. Her work focuses on nutrition and environmental health. She holds a postgraduate degree in nutrition at the University of Delhi, India. So welcome, Manish and Vidhu.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Natalie. Yeah, thanks, Natalie, and nice to connect, Kathleen. Hi, everyone. So I'd request Vidhu to just upload the presentation. We'll be presenting it together.
Yeah, just a second. I'm just uploading it.
Yeah. So before she uploads it, so it's a pleasure to speak to you today on this issue, which sits at the at the heart of India's public policy landscape. That is the challenge of transitioning towards sustainable and healthy diets and food systems. So this is not merely a question of what we eat. As we all know, it is about how we grow, distribute, access, and value our foods in a rapidly changing environment and country-specific contexts. So just to begin with, a few months ago, when I had visited a government school in rural part, I just watched a group of children lined up for their midday meal. And on the menu that day was some rice, lentils, and a small portion of greens. So one of the teachers told me that the greens had been grown in a small kitchen garden behind the school, which has been a new initiative by a local women's group. So it was not that much in quantity, but that was the first time in their locality that children were able to eat fresh vegetables regularly while attending the school. So why I'm highlighting this small story, it's because it reflects the complexities of India's relationship with food, a country which is capable of producing enormous quantities of grain, yet it's grappling with the silent crisis of poor dietary quality, micronutrient deficiencies, and also there's large regional disparities in food access. So Vidhu, can you go to the next slide? Yeah. So if we look at historically, India has come a very long way since the Green Revolution. We forget that just 60 years ago, the fear of widespread famine was real. And now today we are producing over 300 million tons of food grains. So this is a remarkable achievement by any measure. And yet we are nearly 14% of our population remains undernourished, and 67% of children are anemic. So there is a contradiction, abundance on one side and deprivation on the other, uh, which captures why sustainable and healthy diet requires urgent attention. uh, so there are also, it's not India specific, there are also global parallels in this. We know that in the US, for instance, the paradox of plenty has led to very high rates of obesity and diet-related diseases. Uh, in Japan, the promotion of local food cultures has helped sustain one of the healthiest population in the world. And also, Brazil has come out with dietary guidelines which encourage citizens to value minimally processed foods and also respect traditional practices. So these instances and examples tell us that what we eat is never just about food. It is also tied to our identity, culture, environment, issue of economics and value. So the concern we also face today is far beyond hunger. They have, as we all know, they also intersect with poverty, environmental degradation, biodiversity loss, urbanization, and rapid dietary transitions. So the food system, so to say, is under stress from these multiple directions, including climate variability, unsustainable practices, production practices, then fragmented markets and all. So the chapter on which this speech is based explores these challenges through the lens of sustainable diets. So as we all know, it's the sustainable diets is not only about healthier choices, and they also embrace well-being, equity, environmental integrity, cultural heritage, and affordability. So we will highlight some key insights from the chapter. Next slide, please. If we look at the agriculture, which is the first key determinant of sustainable diet, so India's agriculture success is undeniable. Production has increased sixfold. So farmers has adopted new seeds, fertilizers, and technologies, but this has come with consequences in terms of environmental degradation. Monocultures of rice and wheat have eroded crop diversity. Excessive fertilizer use has damaged soil health. Then the issues of groundwater depletion in states like Punjab and Haryana. And this is also happening in other parts of the globe. Say in Africa, also maize monocultures are crowding out indigenous grains like millets and all. Similarly, in China, also chemical intensive farming have also contaminated and destroyed the natural resource base. So that's a problem in other parts of the world as well. Also, when we look at the health front, the picture is equally complex. Uh, uh, Let me offer you an example, relatable. A typical Indian food plate, whether in different parts of India, is dominated by cereals. Rice or wheat often occupies half the plate, while vegetables or protein sources, especially for poor households, form a very small fraction. Over time, this cereal heavy diet has resulted in widespread micronutrient deficiencies, and also in many urban Indian homes, supermarkets are filled with chips, biscuits, noodles, so which are convenient and aggressively marketed, and obviously the children gravitate towards them naturally. But we all know that their nutritional value is extremely low. So, yeah, so this is a major challenge also, particularly in urban areas. And we have good examples globally where, say, for example, in Mexico, they have introduced sugar tax and clear labeling. So, so it's but the question is not only about the taxes and the labeling, but also about affordability, awareness, and availability of nutritious foods in the Indian context. Next slide, please. So one of the most fascinating aspects of India is the cultural and regional diversity. So we all know we had different cuisines in different parts of India when you travel from north to south to east to west. So yet these diverse food cultures are not reflected in our national food policies, which remain centered on rice and wheat. As a result, the nutrient-dense foods like millets, which were celebrated, and there's policy focus also on its good, is essentially, but that how to revive that, and the challenge is still exists. If we look globally, also the value of traditional diets is being rediscovered. I just came across a very interesting Japan's Wasoku diet culture, which is a traditional diet culture in of Japan, and it is recognized as a UNESCO intangible cultural heritage. And the native food traditions of Mexico and Mediterranean diets. So they have got international recognition and all. Coming to the environmental pressures, which is an important determinant of sustainable diet, they are the most urgent, and India has to the tune of 120 million hectares of degraded land. And there's also emissions, which is also a part of how to go for sustainable practices and all. And there is also economic and post-harvest issues, more in terms of there's huge dependence on agriculture for livelihood, as it contributes, and it also contributes 15% to GDP, and half of population is dependent on it for the livelihood. There's large post-harvest losses. So as we look at these challenges, one thing is very clear, that advancing sustainable diets will require coordinated and transformative action. We all know that the path is not easy, but the benefits for everyone are profound. So my colleague Vidhu will just quickly highlight on the policy dimensions and what can be done for advancing sustainable diets in India. Vidhu, over to you.
Thank you. So if we look at the policies and programs which have been launched by the Indian government to address the issues which are there for the sustainable food and nutrition security in India, we'll see that these are in different 4 dimensions, trying to cover the entire food system process, that is the food production. Then we have the food and land use and sustainability. Then we have the food distribution, and finally the nutrition part of it. So there are various policies which have been launched, but the major issue is that they have always focused on the food security, that is the quantity of food which is available, but that has not been translated into food nutrition security. That is the quality of food which has been consumed and which is being consumed by the population till now. So if we look at the policies which exist in food production level, they are focusing on various sustainable agricultural policies, but still we are far behind to emphasize on the millets and other core cereals, which are climate resilient as well. Similarly, if we look at the food distribution policies which are there in India, this targeted public distribution system provides the subsidized foods to the vulnerable population. But then again, these are focused more on the macronutrient rich foods such as rice, wheat, but they are not providing you any kind of micronutrients. And if we look at the supplementary feeding programs which exist to improve the nutritional status of children and women, then we have midday meal programs, we have integrated child development schemes, which do focus on providing various nutrient-rich foods. But then again, the coverage and the availability of frontline workers to improve the nutrition awareness is rare. So these policies are working in silos. They do exist, but they are working in silos, and we miss the convergence, which is the need of the hour to improve the nutrition security in India. So based on these policies and programs, if we'll go on to the gaps which exist, we'll see that there is a success in food production, as is evident from the previous slides, but then there is weak translation to the nutrition outcomes, because there is very little focus on the nutrient-rich foods such as fruits and vegetables, as mentioned by Dr. Manish, that the food plate, which is common in India, that mainly consists of half of the food plate is mainly consists of cereals, which is providing you energy, but not the micronutrients. Then we also see that there are fragmented markets in India. That is, the farmers do not have direct interaction with the markets. They have middlemen, and these small markets actually creates these fragmentation, which again create a systemic issue. Then the supply chains for perishables is a big gap, or we can say a challenge, as these supply chains lack the availability of cool chambers which are needed, or the cold supply chain at the ground level, at the local level, which is required. So we face a lot of post-harvest losses because of it. If we look at the delivery and accountability deficits, then we see that the implementation is different at in various states. So there is a challenge of the availability of frontline workers who are dealing with it. Then again, we have the uneven monitoring system through which we can actually manage these accountability deficits. Then we have, as I already mentioned, that there are various government departments, agricultural, health, education, which are working towards these food and nutrition security issues, but they are working in silos as a separate entity. We want something which needs to be combined together. So there's a need that this should be addressed. Finally, if we'll come on to the programs which are there, they are production centric, but they are mainly focusing on rice and wheat. Though we have certain we did have certain initiatives which focused on millets encouragement, their production and their consumption, but we are still lacking a lot in it. So if we look on to what we can do, so we can say that there is a need to shift from provision and supplementation to the empowerment and behavior change. This can be achieved through the campaigning or nutrition building awareness generation for the healthier consumption, especially among the women who are the major caregivers in Indian households, and they are responsible for the dietary food choices of the entire household, of the entire family. And the another factor which is important is the multi-sectoral convergence. So, for example, we can look into the inclusion of nutrition education for the medical doctors, for to let them know about what is sustainable diets, how we can actually deal with it at the first diagnosis, and also the
Vidhu,
training of. Sorry,
Vidhu, I'm just going to, sorry to interrupt. Your talk is so rich and so much to say. I know it's very difficult to do it in 5 minutes, but I'm mindful of the time also with our other speakers. We will make the slides available to colleagues as well. If you don't mind, you could just take 1 more minute to wrap up.
Sure, thank you. Then moving on to, there's a need that the public distribution should expand beyond rice and wheat. They should also include protein-rich foods and millets and climate-resilient crops. And finally, what I can say is that there is a need to adopt a folk-to-farm approach, which needs to address the assessment, monitoring, and evaluation, and finally coming on to the policy advocacy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think the lack of collaboration between policy and government departments is applicable to places around the world. So very important to achieving successful and effective policy. Thank you for that. Now we'll shift to our next presenters. And a reminder to drop questions in the chat if you have any. So Johanna Jacobi is an assistant professor at ETH Zurich. Before that, she worked as a senior scientist at the University of Bern in different research projects on food systems sustainability in Latin America and Africa. Her research focuses on agroecology as a transformative science, practice, and social movement, and on power relations in food systems with approaches and methods. And Theresa Tribaldos is head of the Just Economies and Human Wellbeing Impact Area at the Center for Development and Environment at the University of Bern in Switzerland. She is a geographer and political scientist by training and holds a PhD from ETH Zurich. Her research focuses on sustainability and justice in food systems, food system transitions and transformations, and interventions to make these systems more sustainable. Transdisciplinary research approaches for sustainable development are at the core of her research. So, all yours.
Thanks, Natalie, and welcome everyone to our presentation on the alternatives to agro-extractivism in South America. I will start with a short conceptual overview of the topic, and then Johanna will give you some insights into the two examples that we actually had in the book chapter. So what is agro-extractivism? When we talk about agro-extractivism, we mean an increasing model of input industries that supply inputs for industrialized agricultural production. So that's a production which is very standardized and works in large monocultures. And this agricultural production actually supplies cheap commodities for an industrial food processing, which is also very standardized. It often produces ultra-processed and unhealthy food, which is then distributed in large supermarkets. And we see that also this kind of production often contributes to unhealthy diets and malnutrition, with all the health problems that we have heard in the previous presentation. And I think we can conclude from this model that it is contributing to power concentration along the food chain, but especially among the input industries, industrialized food processing and the supermarkets. And this model is also impoverishing biodiversity and ecosystems through these large monocultures, which do not leave a lot of room for biodiversity, but also it's impoverishing cultural dietary traditions. And we have also heard from the previous speakers that this rich culture of food and food items is a problem if that diminishes. And then, of course, the malnutrition for people and ecosystems. And so in our book chapter, we propose the model of biocultural diversity as an alternative to this agro-extractivism, and biocultural diversity as a way to contribute to just and sustainable food systems. So what we mean by biocultural diversity, this is a system which is based on context-adapted seed production and sharing, which then contributes to food production in diverse agro-ecosystems. It then is the food that comes out of these agro-ecosystems is then processed in small and artisanal food processing. There are diverse distribution channels where this food is reaching the consumer, and this contributes to healthy and diverse diets. So diversity is a very important concept of this system. It's diversity in agricultural production, but also careful and lightly processing of primary production, and then, of course, diversity in the diets. And I displayed this as a circle here because it's basically a system which lives of the symbiosis of high agrobiodiversity and cultural traditions. And these two basically have co-developed over a long time in many areas that where we can see this biocultural diversity. And actually this symbiosis has then led to the healthy diets and healthy environments for people to live in. Okay, and with that, I hand over to Johanna.
Thank you, Theresa. Great introduction. So I will now show two examples that we presented in the chapter as such alternative approaches to these extractivist food systems that we are usually told there's no alternative to, but there are actually so many alternatives all around the world, and we selected two that we found interesting. This one is here from La Paz in Bolivia, where I lived and worked for several years, and I was also part of this urban garden. It's called Huerto Orgánico La Cauta, and it's in an old park in La Paz. You can see the city in the background. And it's really become a big space for food production and for recreation and reconnection with nature for local families. And they also meet each other there. So it's also a social space. And they can really produce, with a low cost, they can produce a lot of vegetables there. And they use, what's very interesting, a lot of recycled materials that they get donated from local companies, like wood and plastics and so on. And they build all kinds of things with that. And then they use also agroecological methods, like you can see here on this painted sign, like what we want in the garden, are all the insects and all the birds, because they help us against the pests and so on and the diseases. And so it's pesticide-free vegetable production, and people really valued that, to have healthy food and also to have accessible food, because vegetables in the city can be very, very expensive, and then they save money on that, and then they're not really eating very well. So it also really helps for the sustainable diet. And then they practice a lot of ancient practices like trueque, which is swapping, like somebody has a lot of lettuce and the other one has a lot of carrots or something, and then they exchange. And then they make these community potlucks, which they call aptapi. That's a traditional way of coming together and sharing food, and collaborative work days. And they have women-led plots, so local women manage most of the plots, but also together with their families. And so it's also really a family place, and where people, like I said, already interact. And it's also an educational platform, so there are many students coming from schools, and teachers go there with their classes. And yeah, also community members come and can learn from each other, like how to make organic fertilizer and small gardening. And it's very interesting. It's big now, there are many plots, and it's actually also very productive. And there are statistics that tell us that urban spaces can be very, very productive, and some cities produce over half of the food that's consumed within the city boundaries. So I think it's very, it has a big potential also plays a big role in sustainable diets. And so there was some research on it, how much people value this for their diets and for their social cohesion, and I think the impacts are very good. And maybe let's come to the other example. Oh yeah, there's the points I mentioned. Can you click again so there are the points that I will mention? Yeah. No.
Oh, you mean sorry.
The next one also has the bullet points. Yeah, thanks. Perfect. So the other example is the Rede Ecovida in Brazil. That's an agroecology network. It's quite big now. Also, that is in several states of Brazil. So it's in Santa Catarina and Rio Grande do Sul, in Paraná, Sao Paulo, parts of Sao Paulo and Bahia. And it has a model of sustainable production and food system transformation and distribution consumption. So it really covers the whole food system with its approaches. And it already exists since 1998. And it's really comes out of a process of countering the Green Revolution-based food system that is very narrow in a way in food items. So they really wanted to re-diversify and also reconnect producers and consumers more directly. And it's a really diverse network with small family farmers and traditional community, and with NGOs that support it, but also universities. There are also consumer organizations and some social movements. So they connected with La Via Campesina, for example, which is maybe the biggest global social movement with over 200 million members worldwide. And also then the Brazilian landless movement. It's also quite big. So they support each other. And then also some local governments have started to support it and also given them space where they can, for example, sell, like here their produce in the cities. And it's also really an idea of how to strengthen agroecology. So it's also about sustainable farming, not using pesticides, receive or give technical trainings on how to do this kind of production without fertilizers and pesticides from outside. And then that farmers can meet and exchange seeds, for example, because seeds are also a big topic, that they are often not accessible anymore, very expensive, or very few varieties available. Or the seeds cannot be reproduced, right? Because they're hybrid or they're protected in some way with intellectual property. They've received a lot of NGO funding also, so it's really also become a big project, I would say. But the interesting thing is that's really a local initiative out of a need. And what's also interesting is that they have a decentralized organization. So they built this little nuclei in every place where they have a group, bringing together local farmers and consumers and local policymakers and so on. So they exist in many municipalities, and then they also have their own markets where they sell. And one interesting concept that they use is the comida de verdade. That means the real food. So it's not ultra processed. It's not full of pesticides. It's also not empty of nutrients. So it's really a food that really nourishes people, and that also builds on the food traditions of the place. So it's very diverse. So you won't find the same food in Rede Ecovida nucleus somewhere in the south and when you go in Sao Paulo or something. So it really varies. And it gives the food system a chance to re-diversify and to reconnect. And they build on trust and accountability, so it's not so much like outside control like you have in certification mechanisms, but they really have the social cohesion and organize this among each other. So I think these two examples are really a bit exceptional in building nutritious and alternative food systems, and they are also quite successful. I mean, the garden in La Paz is very small comparatively, but if we assume that in many cities these kind of gardens come up, we can really see that they have a transformative potential. For example, in Zurich, where I work, we also have these gardens now, and there are hundreds of households connected to them now, I would say. So it's not a niche anymore. Yes, and very important to take into account when we talk about sustainable food systems and nutrition. Theresa, you have anything to add, or is it okay?
This is totally okay. Thank you very much.
So, thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, those are inspiring examples for sure, and a good reminder that alternatives to the dominant corporate food system do exist, even despite a lack of supportive policies sometimes. So it's great to hear. Now I'd like to shift it to our final presenter. Liesel Carlsson is a professor and dietitian at Acadia University. Her teaching and research on sustainability, food systems, and nutrition examines how health professionals can contribute to sustainability. She works and lives in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq Nation. Welcome, Liesel.
Thank you. Thank you, Natalie, for the introduction and for the invitation. I'm just going to continue on that as part of that land acknowledgement that you read for me. Thank you. Is that I work toward honoring my relationship to the history through continual efforts to protect and respect the land and to learn about Mi'kmaq ways of knowing, their foodways and health beliefs. So I'm going to talk to you about how to move beyond what not to eat as part of sustainable diets. So we're well supported by guidelines at the national and international level that clarify what dietary patterns at a population level are more sustainable. However, there is no template for how to facilitate this, although we have just been introduced to quite a number of different really fantastic examples, and I'm going to try and thread a few of them into my talk. So global guidance for sustainable dietary patterns includes common messages about what not to eat. Some familiar examples to this audience might include, so reducing food and food-related waste, decreasing meat consumption, avoiding highly processed foods. The list goes on, but I'm sure that many of these sound familiar. And so while these and many more are grounded in really strong evidence, and so just to be clear, I'm not disputing the accuracy and the truth of these messages, facilitating behavior change toward them is very, very complex, and agency is really key to this process. So to be clear, in the chapter that I submitted, or that has been published, my audience is health professionals and those who work with food, nutrition, and health. So these professionals work across many components of the food systems and across many levels of our social system. So from the household to the community to the broader population, they might be nutritionists or dietitians, public health nutritionists, health promoters, depending on the country and the context, the name and title might vary, but I'm really writing towards a group of individuals who are tasked with addressing some of the health-related challenges that earlier speakers brought up around food systems and diets. So to start with, there are a couple of challenges. So facilitating this sustainable dietary uptake for this audience has three main challenges. The first are disciplinary paradigms. So many health professionals are trained in the biomedical sciences and the social determinants of health paradigms, but those which dominate our training are extremely helpful under certain contexts, but not for this challenge that's brought us together here today. Behavior change is also hindered by socio-ecological realities of people's lives. And again, we've heard some great examples from earlier speakers. And then the third challenge is that what is sustainable is highly contextual. At the community level, this is especially complex and elusive. And I think our colleagues, Dr. Anand and Vidhu Gupta, brought up some really good examples of how the diversity of those solutions is going to play out, especially in a large country like India, like Canada, etc. Oh, sorry, I'm just going to go back for a second. So I'm going to focus on just these latter two that I've bolded and their relationship to facilitating agency, in part because we only have 5 minutes. So to address barrier 2, focusing on shifting the burden from the individual choice to the environment is really important for health professionals to keep in mind. So one example, and I have many on the slide here, but I'll only speak to one and I can answer questions later if we have the time, is to create sustainable food environments from which everyone can choose. And my example is in hospitals and schools, because this is often a target setting for health professionals and health promoters. And so the image that you see on the on my right anyway, is of a hospital-based garden that's been set up by health professionals in this hospital in Trinidad and Tobago. So in this example, our colleagues have set up an opportunity to produce food within the hospital in order to be able to bring that into the menu. So as part of creating a healthy food environment in the hospital. So this means that we're ensuring the availability of healthy, local, fresh, and culturally meaningful food in a place where people come to become well. And so this becomes really, really important, that this doesn't become or doesn't fall to the responsibility of the individuals or the families to ensure that those who are in hospital, who again are trying to get well, that they're reliant on outside sources for nourishing food. And for the third barrier, I want to talk about empowering agency. And so again, for health professionals, this tends to be outside of the realm of our training. So to start with, diets are not sustainable if they undermine nutrient adequacy. That one we're well trained in, but they're also not sustainable if they're culturally inappropriate or if they're inaccessible. And so the goal is to support food systems where knowledge and power is returned to the community. There are many examples of this, but the one that I want to highlight is the use of dialogue by health professionals. And I'll use a couple of examples. But across these sort of dialogue-related approaches, we pair specialized knowledge in this context, nutrition and sustainability, with community expertise on local context and translation. And so through this sort of dialogue process, people are building a common language for understanding what do we mean when we say sustainable food systems, for example, and probably just as importantly, decreasing what I would call noise, right? What is the information coming at us that's actually not relevant, not true, et cetera. This is especially true in today's current reality where so much is coming at us through unfiltered social media channels. The specific example I'll include is one that's come to me more recently since I've published this chapter, and that are community dialogues or DIAS community dialogues. And so these involve agricultural extension workers, health professionals, nutritionists, sustainability professionals, community leaders, and the context that I've learned about them is in rural Malawi. And so what's so interesting about these is these are local dialogues where we bring together the wealth of expertise from the various people in the room to solve a specific problem or to have really focused dialogues about a specific topic that's relevant. So translating sustainable diets within the community would be broken down into various conversations. And so what that means is you have a sharing of expertise, but also coming up of solutions that are community and contextually specific. And so I think about examples earlier, Theresa, Tribaldos, you were talking about context specific or context adapted seeds and how that can trigger a cycle of much more contextually adapted food. Ashley, Meredith, you were talking about a really specific example of local knowledge being translated into or perpetuated as a way of as a way of perpetuating sustainable food systems. And so one of the things that I find really interesting about this process is that at that local level, a couple of individuals from those community dialogues then participate at the next level, at more regional dialogues, together with representatives from a number of other different local contexts. And those conversations can then move their way up. So not only do we get local translation, but they have an opportunity to create the structure, the social structure and scaffolding for really genuinely people-informed policies at regional and national levels. And so I can speak more to those through the questions, but I want to end on one final note, is that is the state of the community, including the physical and cultural infrastructure that guides our day-to-day actions, does include and does influence our cultural paradigms over time. So inviting community to be part of that knowledge creation and solutions supports cultural shifts in perpetuity. So thanks very much. Happy to take questions.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Liesel. Yeah, you really emphasized some key points that were present throughout the other presentations as well, especially how context-dependent sustainable food systems are. And of course, not one solution can fit all communities across the world. So that's very key. And yeah, we'd love to open it up to discussion and questions. So if you have any thoughts, please raise your hand or write in the chat. And as we wait for questions, I'd also love to hear from the authors whether, I mean, this research that you've summarized here was published a couple of years ago, and so we're curious what has, if anything, has built off of it since then. Are there any examples of other successes, other local initiatives, or any progress, for example, with policy coherence in India, or any major shifts that have kind of built off of your research?
Yeah, hi, Vidhu, are you there?
Yeah.
Yeah, so thanks. Maybe we'd like to highlight an initiative which we undertook post the chapter writing and which has come out very well. So maybe it was a pilot initiative which we undertook and generated some evidence on localizing food systems. So maybe Vidhu, you can just highlight a little bit. Maybe you can just share the slide.
Sure. So we actually did this pilot study in the rural Uttarakhand, which we basically focused on the sustainable nutrition and livelihood security. Over here, we wanted to use the local foods, the local crops which were grown there by the local farmers, and use that to develop the nutrient-dense food products, which were distributed among the Anganwadi centers, the children between the age of 4 to 7 years. So those food products were developed by the local women self-help groups. So that actually improved the nutrition awareness. Along with that, it also provided them with the certain employment opportunities, and the skill development, the capacity building was there. The second objective of ours was that the indigenous knowledge of the food crops which are grown in the local areas, that should not be lost like we have seen over the years. So they should know that it is not necessary to just to be dependent on the rice and wheat or the crops which are there in the market, but they can actually grow their own crops and then use those to prepare various kinds of food items which could be built into different products liked by the kids. And we also tried to use for the production of these products, we tried to use the renewable energy source of solar energy. And along with that, to understand, as we know that water and sanitation is a major problem when we look into the nutrient absorption scenario. So we tried to analyze the water quality in the local area. because it was mainly the, we can say, the spring water which was available there. So that was our major objective behind this implementation of to improve the nutrition security amongst the local children there. Dr. Manish, if you would like to add something.
Thanks, Vidhu. In the interest of time, maybe if those who are interested, we can also share the details, further details. But it was a very good example initiative where we had a lot of convergence between different government departments as well as the local stakeholders over there. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's a great graphic and great to hear. Ashley, did you want to jump in?
Sure. Yeah. So at the beginning, when Natalie shared a little bit about my background, this ERC grant project is one of the things that has come out of it. Although not, how do I put this? They're kind of coming together. So it's one thing to identify that the sound-based practices or the sound knowledge in these practices have been utilized to promulgate food security and food sovereignty. It's another to know how it actually works. So this ERC grant actually allows me and my team to focus on the procedural knowledge, so to understand how these sound-based practices work, to teach the timing in the neck lap dance, and to teach the motions that go with having it all, having everyone in the group work together to create one larger net, essentially. So that it's even though sound knowledge is not quite food security, it's one of the outcomes. It's an unintended outcome. To do more research, but also to have the opportunity to understand why it works that way and how it works. So I just wanted to add that. Thanks, Natalie.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Yeah, that's so fascinating and important to know. Did any other author want to jump in on this? Or if there are any other questions, we're reaching the end of our time. Oh, Theresa.
Yeah, maybe to very shortly, I try and answer to Kathleen's question in the chat. I think fortunately, or firstly, I don't know, but I think the health problems and environmental problems have become so big in like most of our societies that governments cannot really ignore these anymore. So I think they're encouraged by health costs and health problems and environmental problems and costs. And so to address this topic, and I see that here in Switzerland, we have a lot of discussions actually, or have had over the past years. It's ongoing, and a lot of discussions how to address these problems and how to transform our food systems towards more sustainability and more health. I'm not sure that this is actually always going in the right direction. I feel that we don't really get out to our like paths that we already have. So this seems to be very problematic. But I think I would echo Liesel, and I think that it's really important to have a lot of discussions, and especially discussions about values, because there's so much polarization also, in at least here in Switzerland, but I believe in other places as well. And I think to overcome this polarization and like get to a better understanding about each other's perspectives, I think it's really important to have discussions with different people, and also get out of the like bubbles we are all in, and try to discuss with people who might have completely different opinions. But I'm fearing that this is a very slow path. I don't think there is a quick solution to that.
Absolutely. More dialogue is certainly important. And I'd love to pass it to Kathleen.
Wow, what a superb session. As colleagues said in the chat, what a rich chat also. And as Liesel encouraged others, Elaine's in the group today. If others want to drop anything in the chat, we'll be sharing notes afterwards as well. So thank you all for such superb content. I could listen to you all for longer time, and I'm very sorry for the very restricted window of 5 minutes. I know it's woefully inadequate. We are thrilled. Like, I can't believe the beauty and the power of all these slides to tell the story even more than the chapters, in my view, because we're translating to other users. The chapters are excellent, but we really want to get this used in the hands of policymakers and practitioners. Which is why I was kind of interested in the role of governments and universities as well, because that's kind of where I'm leaning. Natalie has been stellar in organizing this webinar series, so we're going to be putting this on our YouTube channel, so your work will continue to be live out there. As well, we're inviting collaborators to be joining in policy briefs. We are partnering with the Journal of Agriculture, Food Systems, and Community Development, and we'll be inviting chapter authors, along with others, to contribute a 2-page policy brief on a topic of choice. That's and there may be calls. Right now we're working on one on the produce prescriptions, so as kind of food as medicine subcategory, but there will be other topics over the next number of years. So we really urge all of us to be thinking about implementing, actualizing, and making accessible this good science. And I can hear it already in all of your work. So thank you all so very much for your leadership. I'm inspired by everything I'm hearing today. Very hopeful. As Theresa, you note, it's big. The issues are great. The time is now for us to do all we can collaboratively. So I wish you well with your good work, and I really welcome further follow-up together. So thank you all.